As you're learning to produce the genre of jungle and drum and bass music, it's important that you know the breaks. The breaks are the backbone of the music, and essentially breaks are drum solos sampled from funk and soul records, often from the 60s and 70s, but other genres are also sampled. Early producers would take these breaks, speed them up, process them with EQ and compression and other effects such as time stretching and flanging to totally change and manipulate the break. So today I'm going to show you 10 essential breaks to learn jungle and drum and bass. I'm going to show you some quick tips on how to use them in 2024. And then I'm going to pair each break with an accompanying bass so you can hear how it sounds in context. All the bass presets I'm going to be using today can be found in my CRM preset pack, Gnarly Volume 2. You can learn more down in the links below. And just for this video, I'm providing it for 10% off. Also, all the breaks I'm using today can be downloaded for free in the links below. Alright, let's go. Alright, the first break we're going to talk about is sampled off Bobby Bird's Hot Pants, hence the name of the break, Hot Pants. This record was released, I think, around 1971, and funny enough, it was produced by James Brown, the godfather of funk and soul. And this break was used a lot in the 90s, especially in atmospheric drum and bass by 𝗙𝗙𝗘𝗘𝗘, even PFM. It was also used a lot in a lot of early jungle, especially jungle roller tracks. Here's the original break. Now for this project, every beat I'm going to be showing you will be sped up to 170 beats per minute, but you're free to adjust the tempo to your liking. Jungle ranges from 173 all the way to 175. I've sometimes seen even higher, but just to keep things all the same, we're doing 170 BPM. And the quickest way to get this to sync to your tempo is first to double click on the file and just make sure it's warp mode is on. That allows us to sync the file or the drum loop to the beat. Now it's important that your drum loop is a perfect bar or multiples of a bar. So let's click on warp, and here's the trick I like to do. So this highlighted area should be 1 bar. So currently this beat is stretching over a bar. So the quickest thing you can do is hold down shift and then hover your mouse over the top right corner of your audio file, and you see this little icon which allows you to time stretch the beat. All right, so now we have it at 170 beats per minute at a perfect bar. Now you might notice that it sounds a bit odd because it's time stretching the audio, and certain slices need to be compressed to get it to fit the smaller area. Because of that, there are anomalies or artifacts in the sound. It just doesn't sound as dynamic as the original. So the way we can resolve this, we can go into the actual file again. And the easiest way we can resolve this issue is changing the time warping algorithm. Currently it's set to complex, which does some complex algorithms, the time stretch audio files. This works better for musical loops and whatnot, but if you choose repitch, what it will do is it will pitch the break up to match the tempo of the track. If you ever pitched up a record on a turntable, you'll notice that as it pitches up, it also plays faster. So that's essentially what it's doing, is when you pitch something up, it compresses the time of the audio. And that sounds a lot more natural. Now, that's not to say you couldn't try the other algorithms. If you choose Complex Pro, you would just have to manually pitch it up. When you use this method, it still applies some kind of algorithm to the audio. This mode, I like to bring format down to 0. You do get some interesting results when you pitch it super high, which you normally can't get with other algorithms. You could try also some of the texture algorithms, and then you get that awesome time stretch sound when you pitch up the break, adjusting the grain size. Essentially what it has to do is when you pitch it up with texture mode, it needs to take small samples, which we call grains, to fill out those gaps. And that's how you get that cool old school sound. All right, so that's working with the break in audio. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, you know I like to sequence the break in MIDI. And there's actually some benefits to doing it this way. Now, to do it, we first have to chop it up. And I like to use this tool called Recycle by Propeller Heads. This tool has been around for over 20 or 25 years. It still stands the test of time in that it's a very useful tool for cutting up breaks. And I'll show you why. First and foremost, you can use this slider, which automatically detects the break or the little slices. You may have to manually add a few slices here and there to get every main slice. And I'll just play a few slices for you. Now, the real power with this tool is that you can turn on this little toggle here. This enables a bunch of other options. And the really cool thing here is there's a stretch option. And what this does is it creates an artificial tail at the end of the slice. And why is this helpful is that if you didn't have this tail and you chopped it up and resequenced it, when you pitch it up, you're going to have gaps in between of the slices because as you pitch it up, time is compressed, right? So by doing this actually adds a tail and it doesn't actually do a time stretch. So even though this parameter is called stretch, it's not technically stretching the file, which would cause artifacts as you've heard in Ableton. What it's doing is it's analyzing the file and it creates a tail from that data. And that makes it sound more natural when you're pitching up the break because then when you pitch it up, that tail fills out the gaps. So this is with zero stretch or zero tail and 100%. You'll hear that it kind of trails out and that really helps out. All right, so once you have the break slice, all you have to do is just save it as an RX2 file. You might have heard of RX2 files if you used sample packs for breaks. They're just breaks pre-cut in this method. You just save it and then you can open it up in Ableton. Now just look for the break in Ableton's browser, right click on the break and you want to slice to new MIDI track. Now you can use Ableton's default slicing preset. It just has some basic parameters which puts each slice into a drum rack. But I actually have a slicing preset. I have a number of these. I think you can find them down in the links below. And this has a number of extra parameters to manipulate your break. So I'm just going to use Stranger Slicing preset main here. And then we'll click OK. All right, now we have the break playing in MIDI cut perfectly. What's great about this is when you pitch it up, we'll use the pitching knob in my slicing preset. Listen to how natural that sounds. I'll just demonstrate this for you. I have this break cut here in audio. Now, if I were to pitch this up, let's pitch it up by like 8 semitones. You can see now there's gaps in between. And that's the thing we're trying to resolve here by using Recycle to cut up your break, adding a tail at the end of each slice. And now that sounds a lot more smoother. All right, and a couple things in terms of this break. I like to sequence it this way. I find it easier to resequence. You could kind of do a pattern like that. Duplicate this part here. And you have a step of pattern, or you just can experiment and find new patterns. We'll stick with this pattern here. Some things in terms of this break, I like to EQ it. Actually, in terms of pitching the hot pants, my go-to pitches, usually around 6 semitones. Usually that's how it sounds in most jungle records. 8 sounds all right as well. I find 10 a bit too high, but that's not to say you can't. Even pitching it down could work since we have it in MIDI. It sounds all intact. Again, it's not doing any warp algorithm, so it sounds super natural when you pitch it up and down. Now, in terms of EQing, I like to bring up the highs with this break, especially for modern, to make it sound more modern. Around this area, you're seeing around the 8K area here. And to taste, I'll bring around 3 to 5 dB. even around the 9K area, as long as you're using a wide bell shape like this. So wide meaning a wider Q, you're getting that general area. You could also bring up this area here, which is around the 1000 hertz area. That's kind of the body of the snare. Around the 2K area, you get a more snappy snare. And that, I find actually sounds really natural. Before, after. Super fresh. Optionally, you could add saturation. So open up Ableton Saturator and just drive it up. And I love that rugged, raw sound when you saturate it. And by the way, all the breaks I'm going to be using today can be found down in the links below for free. So for this break, I like to pair it up with some 808s, sometimes distorted 808s. So let's use the Deep and Deadly Noise bass from Gnarly Volume 2. And we have this. Nasty. By the way, guys, I'm not doing the 𝗙𝗛𝗡 break today because I have done countless videos on that break. If you want to see me chop up and process the 𝗙𝗛𝗡 break, you can check this playlist up here. All right, the next break is the Think break, sampled off Lynn Collins' Think About It in 1972, and this was also produced by James Brown. Now, this break has several bars, and depending on where you sample it, the snare sounds a bit different. There's a bit of a different vocal chop in it as well as this very fifth section, which is just the shaker. So let's check out the entire recording. This shaker section is especially useful for layering over an 𝗙𝗛𝗡 break. All right, for this exercise, I'm going to use the Think break part 3, the third bar. Just like how the kick hits, as well as the snare. Also, the shakers are nice. All right, so let's just turn on warp mode first, and we're going to stretch this to 1 bar. Now, obviously, there's artifacts doing it this way, so we're going to pitch it up using the Complex Pro mode, or just Complex if you want. Just make sure format is 0 if you're using Complex Pro. Essentially, what I heard is Complex is pretty much the same as Complex Pro with format down to 0. We're going to send the pitch up to 5 semitones. Okay, that sounded pretty natural. That's good enough for me. And the pattern we're going to use here, this is a pattern that I've heard used in an old school jungle track. Is just we take this section here and just replace it over here. Now for this one, I did pitch it up to 5 semitones. Sometimes 6 and 7 also sounds pretty good. It really comes down to your personal preference, but 5 I think is a good middle ground for this track we have here. Now similarly, just like the high pass, I like to boost a super high end. This time I have around the 7K area pushed up by 6 dB. Every break is going to be a bit different because every break has a different tone to it. I think I've also rose this area here. That's kind of the snare area. That's around 1700 hertz. Now, that sounds pretty good. If you want to take it to the next step, you can compress this break. This is where it gets really fun. So I'm just going to reset my settings here so you can hear what's happening. So essentially, we want this threshold means that anything above the line will get compressed. And my ratio is pretty high at infinity, meaning it's just going to squash the break. You can use whatever ratio you like. I just want to completely smash this break. So essentially what I'm doing here is not smashing the transients of the break every time it's over that line. Now, my attack is all the way at 0.01, so even the transients get smashed. But if you want a little more dynamic, you can bring the attack around, I say, 20 to 50 milliseconds. That means what happens is when it detects a transient, the compressor won't do anything until 20 or whatever milliseconds. So it allows that transient to be uncompressed, and then it compresses it afterwards. So that allows the attack to pass through. Listen to the difference. And that makes it have a really nice squashed sound. I really like that. Let's hear it before and after without any processing. And you can play it with the threshold. All right, let's hear this break over some bass. And this time I'm using the Jungle Square from Gnarly Volume 2. All right, that's giving me some raw old school vibes. By the way, if you're looking for more breaks, we have an entire collection of awesome sample packs for breaks. For that rugged jungle sound, check out the OG Jungle and Acid Lab sample pack. And for more modern sounding breaks, you can check out Fragments and the Hybrid Breaks pack, all down in the links below. All right, the third break is by James Brown. It's called Funky Drummer. Here's the original break. It's from 1970. Now this time I've pre-cut it in MIDI. Let's speed it up to 170 beats per minute. Now with the slicing preset, let's pitch it up. With this one, the same thing again, because most of these breaks, they're recorded usually around 110 to 120 beats per minute. So when you're pitching up to 170, the natural pitch is usually around 5, 6, or 7 semitones. This one even sounds really good at 8. All right, that snare just sounds really nice and resonant. Now with my slicing preset, I have something called tight control here, which adjusts the decay on each slice. It makes it sound really tight. Watch this. And that's really handy. If you want to make it sound modern, we tend to have a shorter decay for more tighter breaks. Now, for this break, I like to sequence it. You'll notice there's some vocal snippets and a horn sample. If you just want a raw break, you're going to have to resequence it. So notice this first part here. We're going to take this out, and we're going to use the kick from here. Now, this kick area is 4 slices, right? There's a double kick. Now, there's that vocal. You may not want that vocal, so you can replace it with a similar section, like here. And you see how easy it is with MIDI. And what I'm actually doing is I'm actually just taking this and just moving it down to the appropriate area. And this, because each slice, we're preserving the MIDI sequence. You'll notice that the sequence is not on the grid, and that's how you preserve the human feel of this break. So it's important if you want to move it around. It's better to just move the area and then just move it up and down, and that'll keep the timing intact. So now we have a natural sounding break. All right. Now, a few more things about this break. Once again, you want to add some EQing, boosting the highs. This time it's around the 7 area, and I am boosting it around 6 dB. That just makes it sound really nice and modern. I am adding compression like before. Just smashing that break. Now here's something really interesting we haven't spoken about yet, and that these recordings are in stereo. Now that is quite interesting because When these drums are recorded, several microphones are placed in the drummer's room. It might be placed on the left or right. There might be one on top. We called it that the overhead. So in the recording, the left audio and right audio tend to sound different, and there's subtle nuances in the break. So once again, this break is playing in stereo. What you want to do is pull out utility. And the first thing you can try is this width knob. By making it even more wide, it kind of exaggerates that stereo depth. So listen to how that sounds as I increase it. And that sounds really neat. Otherwise, you can bring it down to model with this button. And now center the sound. Now, what I really want you to pay attention to is you have this drop down where you can choose either the left and right audio. And this is important. When using these breaks, the left recording may sound completely different from the right. Let's check it out. Do you notice how the right sounds more muted? That means the left microphone might have been placed closer to the hi-hat and rides, which is why you have more high frequencies there. So depending on the sound of the break, choose what makes sense for you. You may want to just use the left audio or the right audio, or you might want to use it in stereo and adjust the depth, the stereo depth. So be mindful of that. For this one, I could even reduce the width. I might want it more centered, but not completely mono. I still want to have some depth there. So to bring it closer to the center, it's down to 60%. All right, let's add some bass. And this time I'm using another famous preset from the pack. This one's called 𝗙𝗙𝗘𝗘 2. Let's check it out. And that sounds nasty. All right, the next break is sampled off Michael Weiner's incredible bongo band. The track is called Apache. Here's the original. And let's warp it this time. And we're going to time stretch it. This is 2 bars, so we'll bring it down to here. Let's now pitch it up. Let's get about 6. All right, and this is already sounding like some classic jungle records. Now this one, as I mentioned with the left and right, this one is very apparent. So let's play with the stereo. Right, let's check out the left. Right. I've seen jungle records where they use exclusively the left or exclusively the right. I like the right one, so let's choose that. I just have this loop here where I've cut up the last 4 bars here and repeated another section. And as we go through each subsequent one, we're going to get through them real quicker now that we have all the basics down. We're not going to have to repeat all the steps. Also, I find for the Apache one, it's nice to layer a hi-hat, like an 808 hi-hat like this. It just accentuates the high end. And in this break, we're also boosting some high end once again around 6K area. And we're dipping some of the box frequencies. But because this is a kind of a thick break, so I'm dipping around the 150 area, and I'm boosting this for the snares around the 1250 area. Here's before. All right, sounds fresher like that. All right, another thing I like to do with the Apache break, and this was done a lot of old school jungle records, is adding pitch modulation. So we're on complex pro mode, and we're in envelope, and we have clip and transposition. So we're using this line to automate the pitch, and we can do something like this. And this was done a lot in old school jungle. Just adds a nice feel to the break. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Let's hear it with the foghorn acceptance preset. All right, and we got some modern retro griminess in this one. All right, next break is by the band of 𝗙𝗙𝗘𝗘. The track is called Humpty Dump. Here's the original break. And you might have heard this break in a famous track by 𝗙𝗏𝗟𝗘 called True Romance. Let's play it back 170 beats per minute and let's pitch it up. And this time we can go as high as 11 semitones. And we're going to use the tight control this time. All right. And going into the break, this section up here. So I'm going to use this. And for this break, I like to layer it with a kick and snare. So this time I have the modular kick and snare instrument. And this is the instrument found in my rollers kit. The modular kick and snare instrument allows you to shape your own snare. So here's a snare here. You can pitch it up, pitch it down. Make it thicker or tighter. Really handy tool if you want to create your own snare. You can check that out also in the links below. Basically, I have this kick and snare here, and we're layering it with the break. All right, and I have some keys and samples, and you might notice where these are from. So let's check it out. Almost forgot we need to EQ this break, and this time I'm boosting the high area by a lot this time, around 10 dB, the 8 hertz area. And you might want to dip some of the box frequencies around the 400 area. And then I just got some very interesting and famous samples you might notice. Let me know where you know these samples are from. And for the bass preset, I'm using 𝗙𝗛𝗓 Digital Nightmare. Check it out. All right, nasty. Okay, following is the assembly line break by the Commodores. And let's pitch it up by 5 or 6 semitones. Bring the tight control. Now notice in the sequence of this break, it's just, I'm using a 1-bar loop and there's this vocal here. To make it less repetitive, this vocal I've replaced with just a kick here, so it only plays once every 2 bars, that vocal. See, with MIDI, you can easily do these kind of manipulations. And for this break, let's boost up some of the highs. We can add some saturation. And for this break, I like to modernize it with some kick and snare and hi-hats. I'm once again using the modular kick and snare and hi-hats from Rollers Kit. All right, let's hear that with the break. And for bass, I'm using the Knock Home Rave preset. Let's check it out. Nasty. All right, the next break is from Ike Turner's Funky Mule, and this was used a lot in choppage and jungle. Talk about drum funk. I believe a track by Breakage called Losing Control uses this break. This time what I've done is I've marked all the transients and I've lined it up to the grid to make it easier to chop up in audio. I just want to use different methods here and show you different ways to cut up breaks. So this one, I like to shuffle here. So we can take bits and pieces and resequence it. For example, I might want to do this. And maybe do a shuffle here and I have this and duplicate that. So we have this. So we have a nice step-up rhythm and you can pitch it up to your taste. And this one, we did do some heavy EQing. So we're removing some of the bottom end and pushing up some of the highs around the 7K area, pushing the snare at 2K. So before, after. And for this one, I like a more rumbling bass. So I'm using 𝗙𝗓𝗟 Old School from the pack. And this is what we have. All right, we have some Rude Boy vibes there. All right, next break is Dykes and Blazers, Let a Woman Be a Woman. Here's the original. And this break is most notable in the track Phantom Force by Digital and Spirit. I especially love that little grunt of vocal snippets. It's really handy. And for this one, I've sliced up each a slice and kind of resequenced it as a two-step break here like this. And yeah, just did some EQing on the top end, really basic. I think I cut the pitch normal here, actually, at regular pitch. So it's handy. Sometimes when you slice it up like this, you can keep it at regular pitch. It sounds fine. And then for the preset, I'm using 𝗙𝗙𝗘𝗘𝗪. All right, sounding rude. All right, this break I know as the Sandy break from old files 30 years ago. But a couple years ago, I found out this break was actually sampled off a record. It's called Versatility Extension Remix by DJ Nyborn or Supreme. And here's the original break. So a lot of early jungle records use this, especially some like Joker records or whatnot, if my memory serves me right. And also a lot of modern rollers and jump up use this, especially the shakers. I love how funky the shakers sound on this break at 170 beats per minute. Now, usually we pitch it up, this one around 8 semitones. I think some Congy Naughty records have used this as well. Now, I'm going to EQ this pretty extreme. Bring up the highs, bring down the box frequencies at around 300 hertz. Now notice the stereo on this one. Let's play up the width. So at mono, it sounds like that. But let's try the left and rights again. So this one, the highs are really in your face, whereas the right sounds a lot tighter. So depending on the track you want to make, choose either the left or right. Kind of like how the right sounds tighter. And let's hear it over a bass. And this time I'm using the preset 𝗙𝗙𝗘𝗘, inspired off the title of that track, also found in Gnarly Volume 2. All right, that's 𝗙𝗙𝗘𝗘. All right, the final break we're talking about is Blowfly's Sesame Street Break. I know this as the helicopter break as well. Here's the original. This is an iconic and legendary jungle break, still used today in a lot of modern jungle tracks. I hear Toby Ross use it a lot as well, even Clips or DJ Clips. Now, because there's a horn sample here, usually it starts from, you play the sample from here and you loop this section like this. All right, obviously we pitch it up, and pitching it up, it sounds like this. So let's EQ it. Once again, when you see me EQing it, I usually do the similar moves, boost the high end, dip some box frequencies, and you should be good. For this one, I like to add some pretty extreme compression, squash that break. Now, that is very loud, so let's bring it down a bit. I'm using this glue compressor as a clipper and just bring it down. It just squares out the transients, so it looks nice like that. Let's hear it without the compression. Which sounds nice and natural, but for that really squash sound, it almost makes it sound like you're sampling off an old jungle record that way. And for this one, you can take that break as is, and I'm gonna play it over the preset called 808 Dirty Bass. Now, what's done recently, I've heard in a lot of tracks, is doing kind of a 4/4 pattern using the snare. First time I've heard this done is Dimensions track UK. You can make it funkier by keeping some of the shakers at the end here to make it that part kind of have that shuffle. Maybe add another snare at the end like this. So then we have that. It's all about thinking about the pattern and arranging it in ways to make it sound funkier. So that's pretty much it. Those are the 10 breaks that I would use in terms of top jungle breaks. There's definitely more, and we might do a part 2 featuring 10 more popular jungle breaks, but I just wanted to give you guys 10 you can start playing around today and start creating some tracks. All right, hope you guys enjoyed watching me chop up my top 10 jungle breaks, processing them, rearranging them, and pairing it up with bass. Remember all the different processes that I've taught you guys, from pitching up the breaks to the different methods of pitching it up, whether you're using stretching algorithms or pitching it up in MIDI. I think it's important to learn all methods and find what method suits your track the best. Every track would require a different method, and try different pitches of the break. Try pitching it up, pitching it down, and try a different number of semitones. Play with different EQing settings, especially if you want a more modern sound. That high end really helps. Also, removing frequencies is very important as well. Finally, remember to check the stereo depth of the break. Sometimes the left sounds better than the right, or vice versa. Of course, you can also add other processing such as compression and saturation and flanging, which we showed you in this video. By the way, my name is 𝗙𝗙𝗘𝗘. If you want to improve your music production, especially with dance music and drum and bass, like this video, subscribe to this channel, and hit that bell notification so you don't miss out on other videos. If you want to support me directly, you can check out deviantaudio.com for sample packs, preset packs, and Ableton kits to help you along your journey. You can find more down in the links below. For more videos on drum and bass drum programming, check this playlist up here. For a playlist on drum and bass sound design, check this playlist up here. Alright guys, thanks for watching, stay creative, and until the next video, peace out.